I never expected the ghost of my family's sins to wear my husband's eyes. That was my first thought when I found them. A man and a baby, huddled under the roaring highway bridge, rain pouring in merciless sheets. The baby's cries were faint, feverish. The man's arms were wrapped tightly around her, his shirt plastered to his skin, his face half hidden beneath tangled hair. He wasn't just another nameless soul swallowed by the city's indifference. He was mine. I stood there, frozen in the mud, my umbrella useless against the wind. "Ethan Whitmore?" I called, though my voice barely rose above the storm. He looked up, suspicion flickering across a face that mirrored my late husband's so perfectly it made my heart falter. "Who are you?" he demanded, shielding the baby with instinctive desperation. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore," I said quietly. "I know your father told you I was dead, but I'm your grandmother." The look that crossed his face in that moment was pure disbelief, the kind that comes only after years of betrayal. I felt the entire weight of my 78 years pressing on me, each one filled with silence, regret, and the kind of wealth that can't buy redemption. 3 days earlier, the truth had arrived in a black folder, thin, unremarkable, yet heavy with ghosts. My assistant had left it on my desk, wordless. She knew better than to ask. For 3 mornings, I'd ignored it, drinking my coffee beside it like it wasn't there. But that morning, something inside me cracked. The ocean glittered outside my penthouse windows. That endless blue stretch of Florida calm I had built to keep the world away. My late husband, Samuel, had died 3 decades ago, and I had filled the silence with marble, glass, and steel, clean lines that left no room for dust or memories. I lifted the folder. Inside were 6 pages and 1 photograph. Cost me $30,000 to learn what I already knew. My family was still broken. The report read like an obituary written too soon. Ethan Samuel Whitmore. Age 28. Factory worker. Terminated. Current residence, unhoused. Location, Columbus, Ohio. Parents, Daniel and Brenda Whitmore. Estranged. That word, estranged, burned. So did the next line. Request for housing assistance denied by parents. History repeats itself, I thought bitterly. My son Daniel had once denied his own father the truth, just as he'd now denied his son a roof. I turned the final page. The photograph was grainy, captured from a distance. A man crouched beneath a bridge, clutching a small child to his chest. The baby's hand reached up toward his face. Small, fragile, alive. I stared until my vision blurred. And for a moment, I wasn't in my pristine office. I was back in the old study on Havenwood Drive, the night Samuel died, the open safe. The empty drawers, my husband's hand clutching his chest, my son's betrayal still echoing through the house. I pressed the intercom. "Margaret, have the jet prepared. I'll need ground transport in Columbus. When will you be leaving, Mrs. Whitmore?" "Tomorrow morning." "And the purpose of travel?" "This one," I said, glancing at the folder, "is personal." When the engines of the jet hummed to life the next morning, I stared out the window into a sea of clouds, wondering if I'd lost my mind. For 30 years, I had stayed safely above the world, above emotion, above risk, above pain. Now I was descending into the wreckage my son had left behind. Columbus greeted me with gray skies and relentless rain. My driver, Thomas, met me with his usual professionalism. "Ma'am, the address you gave me isn't exactly..." "A neighborhood," he said carefully. "It doesn't matter. Take me there." The drive was long and bleak. We left behind the polished glass of downtown, trading it for cracked asphalt, boarded storefronts, and the flicker of neon signs promising loans and liquor. The world here was smaller, colder. When the car slowed beneath the overpass, I saw it, blue tarp, scraps of clothing, and a sagging tent pressed against a pillar like a wound. "I'll go alone," I told Thomas. "Ma'am, it's not safe." I said I'll go alone. I stepped into the rain. The sound was deafening. The smell, wet concrete, gasoline, poverty, clung to everything. My shoes sank into the mud, and I pushed forward until I heard it, a baby's cry, thin and hoarse. I knelt beside the tent. A man's back was to me, shoulders hunched, body trembling as he tried to soothe the child in his arms. "Ethan, I said softly. He turned sharply, eyes wide, defensive. Who are you? What do you want? I'm not here to take anything, I replied. She's sick. She needs warmth, medicine, and food. He pulled the baby closer. They told me people like you always want something. I only want you to come with me, for her sake. The child whimpered again, her face flushed with fever. Ethan's jaw tightened. He was a man stripped to his last ounce of pride, clinging to it like armor. After a long pause, he whispered, "Her name is Lily." "Lily," I repeated. "That's a beautiful name." He hesitated, searching my face for deceit, then gave a weary nod. "1 hour," he said. "We'll go to your hotel. If I don't like what I hear, we leave." "Fair enough," I said. As we walked back through the rain, his daughter pressed to his chest. I thought of Samuel, of what he would say if he could see us now. Perhaps something simple, something like, "Bring them home." The hotel room smelled of antiseptic and rain. Lily lay bundled in crisp white sheets, her tiny chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm as Dr. Winters, a pediatrician I trusted, listened to her lungs. "Respiratory infection," she said gently. "You caught it just in time, Mrs. Whitmore." Her words were meant as reassurance, but I felt only the cold press of guilt. I hadn't caught it in time, Ethan had. A young man with nothing but determination and love had kept this baby alive through storms and hunger. "Will she recover?" Ethan asked, his voice low, raw with exhaustion. "With antibiotics, warmth, and rest, absolutely," Dr. Winters replied. "She's a resilient little thing." Ethan's fingers never left Lily's hand. The small connection between them seemed to anchor him to the world. When Dr. Winters packed up her kit, I thanked her quietly, promising a transfer to her account by morning. When the door closed, the silence between us stretched. The hotel suite was too large, too polished. Its chandeliers too bright for the 2 hollow souls occupying it. "There's food," I said finally, gesturing to the untouched trays on the table. He looked at the dishes, then back at Lily. I saw his reluctance to put her down, even for a moment. "May I?" I asked, extending my arms. He hesitated, searching my face again for danger, then carefully placed his daughter into my hands. The small weight of her felt unfamiliar, yet achingly right. I rocked her gently, humming a tune I hadn't realized I remembered. Samuel's tune, the one he used to hum while working late at night. "Eat," I said softly. "I've got her." Ethan obeyed, and the way he devoured the food told me more about his life than any report could. I turned away politely, pretending to study the rain outside while he ate in silence, preserving the last shreds of his dignity. When he finished, he sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You don't even know us." I took a long breath. "It's complicated," I said. "But you need rest more than explanations tonight. Tomorrow, we'll talk." He nodded slowly, suspicion giving way to sheer fatigue. Within an hour, both father and daughter were asleep. I watched them from the armchair, the rhythmic breathing of 2 souls who had lived too long in fear. For the first time in decades, I prayed. Not to any god I remembered, but to the memory of Samuel, the man who believed every family deserved a home. We left Columbus the next afternoon. The rain followed us to the airport, a gray curtain closing behind the chapter we were leaving. On the jet, Lily slept peacefully, bundled in a soft blanket. Ethan stared out the window, quiet, withdrawn, still half convinced this was some elaborate trick. "You've been silent for hours," I said gently. He turned to me, his eyes tired. "I still don't understand any of this. My father said you died before I was born. Why would he lie about that?" I met his gaze. "Your father lies as easily as breathing, Ethan. He lied to me too, about where he was going, about what he took, about who he became." He didn't answer. I could see the conflict in his face, the battle between resentment and reluctant hope. "You don't owe me trust," I said after a while. "But for now, you and Lily have a safe place to rest. That's all I'm offering." He looked down at his daughter and whispered, "That's more than anyone else ever has." Havenwood Estate rose from the Florida coastline like a ghost of the past, white columns, wide verandas, and gardens that had outlived 3 generations of neglect and memory. As the car wound up the long drive, Ethan's eyes widened. "This is where you live?" he asked quietly. "Lily asleep in his arms." "This is where Samuel and I built our life," I said. It hasn't felt like living for a long time. Inside, the house felt cavernous, the air heavy with silence. Yet for the first time in 30 years, I'd prepared a room not for a guest, but for family. The east wing, once closed off after Samuel's death, was open again. "This will be your suite," I told Ethan. "There's a nursery adjoining it. Maria, the nanny, will arrive soon to help you with Lily. Clothes, food, anything you need, it's all here." He stood in the middle of the room like a man afraid to breathe too deeply. "You didn't have to do all this," he murmured. "I didn't do it out of obligation," I said. "I did it because someone should have." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Thank you." I handed him a small phone. "My number's saved in it. If you need anything at all, you call." He took it with a trembling hand. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," I replied. "Not yet." The first 3 days passed in quiet observation. Ethan rarely left the suite. Maria reported that Lily's fever had broken, her appetite returning. I gave them space. He needed to learn that my kindness wasn't a trap. On the 4th evening, I sat in the sunroom with tea and one of Samuel's old photo albums when I sensed movement. Ethan stood at the doorway, uncertain. "May I join you?" he asked. "Please." I gestured to the seat opposite mine. He carried the baby monitor, glancing at it nervously before sitting. "Maria showed me how to use this," he said with a faint smile. "Still feels strange having help." "Help isn't weakness, Ethan," I said, pouring him tea the way he liked it. "No sugar, a little milk." He nodded. "This place is overwhelming. I took a walk earlier, down to the pond. It's beautiful." "Samuel built that pond himself," I said softly. He believed every home should have something alive at its center. Ethan looked at the photo album on the table. "Is that him?" I turned the page toward him. A young man in work clothes, hammer in hand, a grin bright as sunlight. "That's Samuel. He built our company from the ground up, Havenwood Homes. He used to say we didn't build houses. We built places where people could feel safe." Ethan studied the picture as though it held something sacred. "My father never talked about him. Or about you. Your father made choices I still don't understand," I said carefully. "But Samuel was a good man, the best I've ever known." Ethan was quiet for a long while. "I'm sorry you lost him. I'm sorry you never got to know him," I whispered. Later that night, I passed by the nursery and heard a low humming, the same tune Samuel used to hum while drafting blueprints. Ethan sat in the rocking chair, Lily asleep in his arms. I stood in the hallway unseen, tears burning behind my eyes. For the first time in 30 years, Havenwood felt alive again. 6 months passed like the slow blooming of a long dormant garden. The house that had once felt like a mausoleum now echoed with laughter. Soft, spontaneous laughter, the kind that only a child can bring. Every morning, I would find Ethan and little Lily by the pond. He would hold her tiny hand as they fed the koi, murmuring about clouds and birds. I would watch from the veranda, coffee in hand, pretending not to eavesdrop. It had been decades since I'd seen life so unguarded within these walls. Ethan was changing. The hollow-eyed man I'd met beneath that bridge was gone. His shoulders had straightened, his voice steadied. He'd begun reading again, Samuel's old business books, the ones still stacked in my late husband's study. Sometimes I'd walk past and see him bent over a desk, a pen in hand, lips moving silently as if rehearsing words he'd forgotten how to speak. Still, I saw the restlessness growing in him. A man can survive on peace for only so long before he begins to crave purpose. One bright October morning, we sat on the patio for breakfast. Lily was in her high chair, babbling happily over a piece of toast she had no intention of eating. "Have you thought about what comes next?" I asked casually. Ethan glanced up, wary. "Next? You've built a rhythm here," I said. "You and Lily are safe, healthy. That's a gift, but not a life. Have you considered work?" He smiled faintly, almost apologetic. "I've been applying online. Factory work, mostly. There's a plant about 20 miles north that's hiring." I stirred my coffee, buying a moment before speaking. That's one path. He watched me carefully. You have another in mind? I do, I said. Havenwood Properties has plenty of agents who can sell houses. What we lack are people who understand what makes one a home. You do, he frowned slightly. You mean work for you? Not for me, I corrected. With me. His hesitation was almost physical. I don't have experience. Neither did Samuel when he started building for returning veterans after the war, I said. He learned by doing and caring. Ethan looked down, brushing crumbs from Lily's tray. If I take this job, everyone will think you handed it to me. They'll think whatever they like, I replied evenly. You'll start at the bottom, same as anyone else. No one will know about our connection. You'll earn every inch of what you build. He was quiet for a long time. And if I fail? Then you fail honestly, I said. That's more than most people ever do. By that evening, he'd given me his answer. Ethan arrived for his interview 2 days later. Dressed in a suit that clearly wasn't tailored, but fit him with the kind of dignity no money could buy. Martin Reeves, the supervisor I'd chosen for him, was fair but famously hard to impress. I didn't interfere. I watched from my office window as Ethan shook hands with the hiring team, his posture straight, his face calm but determined. When the email came later that afternoon, confirming his employment as assistant project coordinator, I smiled. Not because I doubted him, but because I knew how much it had cost. Him to take that first step into a world that had once turned its back on him. The first year was punishing. Martin treated him no differently from any other new hire. Long hours, endless revisions, late nights spent poring over zoning maps and environmental reports. Ethan never complained. He learned. He listened. He stayed late. On weekends, I'd see him coming home with dust on his shoes and exhaustion in his eyes. Yet Lily would greet him with such unfiltered joy that fatigue dissolved the moment he lifted her into his arms. He was working not for ambition, but for her. That, I realized, was what made him dangerous in the best possible way. By his second year, Ethan had become a quiet phenomenon within the company. I remember standing unnoticed in a glass-walled conference room, watching him speak to a young couple, teachers looking for their first home. He didn't begin by talking about square footage or marble countertops. Instead, he asked, "How does your morning start? Who wakes up first with the baby? Where do you eat breakfast?" They laughed at first, then answered. He listened, really listened, and with each word I saw him build a picture, not of property, but of belonging. 2 weeks later, they bought a modest 3-bedroom house with a small garden and a kitchen table that fit perfectly beneath a sunny window. He didn't earn a large commission, but he pinned their thank you photo on his office wall like a badge of honor. Word spread. Clients began requesting him by name. His colleagues, who'd once dismissed him as another charity case, started asking for his input. By the end of his 3rd year, he was promoted to senior project manager, overseeing our most ambitious community yet, Whitmore Shores, a development meant for young families priced out of the luxury market, but deserving of beauty nonetheless. During the planning meetings, I watched the transformation with quiet awe. He spoke with conviction, humility, and vision, all at once. People aren't just buying walls, he said to his team. They're buying the space between them, the walk to school, the light from the kitchen window at dinner. The room went still. Even the veterans listened. He was becoming the man Samuel had dreamed one of his descendants might be. Meanwhile, Lily was growing. At 4, she was a whirlwind of curls and laughter, her tiny footprints scattered across Havenwood's polished floors. Ethan had moved them into a modest house 15 minutes away, establishing his independence but never his distance. Sundays became sacred. Dinner, laughter, Lily's art projects displayed proudly on the table. For the first time in 3 generations, the Whitmore family had something that resembled peace. I thought often of Samuel, of what he would say if he saw us now. Perhaps just one word. Finally. The years had softened Ethan's rough edges, but not his core. He was 31 now, steady, respected, unknowingly the embodiment of everything his father had rejected. And then came the morning that would test how far we had truly come. The boardroom was packed for the annual executive meeting. Every vice president, division head, and senior manager sat expectantly as I took my place at the head of the long oak table. I looked around, seeing in their faces the empire Samuel and I had built brick by brick, but only one person in that room understood why we built it. 30 years ago, I began, my husband, Samuel Whitmore, stood in this very room and said something I never forgot. He told us that Havenwood wasn't in the business of building houses. We were in the business of building futures. A ripple of recognition passed through the room. I let the silence stretch, heavy with memory. For 3 decades, I've searched for someone who understood that truth. Not just in theory, but in heart. My gaze found Ethan halfway down the table. His expression was calm, unassuming. I have found that person, I said. Someone who started at the bottom, who proved their worth through integrity, compassion, and a vision of home that cannot be taught. The room collectively turned toward him. Effective today, the new Chief Executive Officer of Havenwood Properties is Ethan Whitmore. A stunned hush, then quiet, respectful applause. Ethan sat motionless, disbelief etched across his face. When he finally rose to stand beside me, he leaned close and whispered, "Why?" "Because," I whispered back, "you are Samuel's legacy, and mine." He faced the room then, steady and composed, and spoke with quiet confidence. As I watched him, I felt a weight I had carried for 3 decades finally begin to lift. The ghosts of Havenwood had been laid to rest. It was late. Afternoon when the past came to collect its debt. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office at Havenwood Tower when Margaret's voice broke through the intercom. "Mrs. Whitmore, there are 2 visitors in the lobby. They're asking for Mr. Ethan Whitmore. They don't have an appointment, but they're insistent." There was something unusual in her tone. "Did they give their names?" I asked, a pause. Then softly, "A Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Whitmore." For a moment, everything inside me went still. The world shrank to the rhythm of my own breathing. 30 years of silence, and now his name again, spoken aloud. "Should I have security escort them out?" Margaret asked carefully. I stood, smoothing my skirt with hands that trembled despite my resolve. "No, tell them Mr. Whitmore is unavailable. I'll come down. Mrs. Whitmore, are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said, cutting her off. "This one is mine." The elevator ride down 17 floors felt longer than the 30 years that had brought me here. As the doors opened, I saw them immediately, Daniel and Brenda, standing near the reception desk, arguing with security. Time had not been kind. Daniel's once charming face was lined and drawn, his hair streaked with gray, his suit worn at the cuffs. Brenda clung to a fading elegance, her jewelry a touch too large, her smile a little too brittle. I stopped a few steps away, and when Daniel turned, his voice died in his throat. "Hello?" "Daniel," I said quietly. He paled as though he'd seen a ghost. "Mother?" Brenda's eyes widened, but she recovered first. "Eleanor," she said tightly, forcing composure. "It's been a long time. We've been trying to reach Ethan." "I'm sure you have," I said, my voice like glass. "The business pages have been generous with his name lately." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "We just want to talk to him." "We're his parents." "You were his parents," I corrected. "You forfeited that right when you turned him away." Brenda's tone hardened. "That's not fair. We made mistakes, yes, but we're still family." "Family?" I repeated the word, letting it echo. "Let's discuss what that means." I turned to the head of security. "Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore to conference room B. Ensure we're not disturbed." "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore." They followed without protest, perhaps mistaking my calm for courtesy. They should have known better. Inside the small conference room, the air felt heavy with things unsaid. They sat together on one side of the table. I remained standing at the other. "You look well," Daniel said, his voice slipping into that old practiced charm that used to fool investors and friends alike. "It's been 30 years, 4 months, and 16 days since the day you emptied our accounts and disappeared," I replied. "Time has a way of healing, if one deserves it." He winced. "I know you must be angry. Anger is for the living," I cut him off. You killed that in me a long time ago, Brenda interjected quickly. We were young. We made terrible choices, but Ethan is our son. We want to make amends. I met her gaze coldly. Amends? Tell me, Brenda, was that before or after you denied your son shelter when he begged for a place to stay? Before or after you let your granddaughter sleep beneath a bridge in the cold? Color rose in her cheeks. We were struggling ourselves. You were comfortable enough to ignore their hunger, I said sharply. You had enough to protect your pride, just not enough to protect your child. Daniel's face crumpled. Mother, please. You don't understand. I never meant you never meant. I stepped closer. You never meant for your father to die either, did you? You never meant for him to clutch his chest beside an empty safe, the one you cleared out. He believed in you until his last breath. He thought love was enough to save you. Daniel's eyes filled with something between shame and panic. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it would. You didn't want to know, I said. And that's worse. Brenda's voice rose, brittle with desperation. You think you can just erase us, replace us with him? You think buying him a future will make you his real mother? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I didn't buy him anything. I gave him what you never did, truth and a choice. I slid a folder across the table. This is a restraining order. It prohibits either of you from contacting Ethan or Lily in any way. And this, I placed another document beside it, is a record of the theft you committed against your father's estate. The statute of limitations may have expired, but public shame never does. Contest this order, and every paper in Florida will know exactly who you are. Daniel's composure cracked. You can't do this. I already have, I said. You wanted to see your son? You just did. You saw what a man becomes when he's loved instead of used. Brenda stood abruptly. You self-righteous, I raised a hand. Careful, dignity may be the last thing you have left. Daniel rose slowly, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. Does he know? He asked quietly. About what I did? Yes, I said. I told him everything, and he forgave you in his own way, by becoming the man you never were. He swallowed hard. And you're proud of that? Proud of turning him against me? I met his gaze steadily. I didn't turn him against you, Daniel. You did that yourself. Silence filled the room like smoke. Finally, I opened the door. Security will escort you out. Do not come back. They left without another word. Brenda's heels clicked sharply against the tile. Daniel didn't look back. I stood there long after they'd gone, the quiet pressing in like the aftermath of a storm. My knees trembled. The calm that had carried me through the confrontation began to crack. I sank into a chair, letting the weight of it all settle at last. 30 years of grief, anger, and unfinished mourning. That was how Ethan found me. He stood in the doorway, his expression a mix of concern and understanding. Margaret told me, he said softly. I'm sorry, I whispered. I should have let you handle it. It wasn't my place. He crossed the room and took my hand, strong, steady, warm. It was exactly your place, he said. You've been protecting this family since the night you found us under that bridge. You don't need to apologize for that. I looked up at him, this man who had been both salvation and mirror. They'll try again, I said quietly. People like that always do, he smiled, gentle but resolute. Then we'll handle it, together. For the first time, the word together didn't sound temporary. It sounded like forever. He hesitated at the door, then said, Lily's downstairs in daycare. She made something for you in art class. Do you want to see it? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The elevator doors opened to the 28th floor, the daycare center. I could hear the faint sound of laughter before I even saw her. Lily was at a low table, her curls tied back with a pink ribbon, concentrating fiercely on something bright and sticky with glue. When she looked up and saw me, her face lit like sunrise. Grandma Ellie, she squealed, holding up a piece of paper dripping with color. It was a painting, crooked houses, a huge sun, 3 stick figures holding hands. Underneath, written in uneven letters, was one word, home. I knelt beside her, feeling the sting of tears before I could stop them. It's beautiful, I said. She grinned proudly. That's you and Daddy and me, see? We're holding hands. Yes, I whispered, tracing the little painted figures. We are. Behind me, Ethan's reflection appeared in the glass. He was smiling, tired but at peace. The boy I'd found under a bridge had become a man standing tall in the sunlight. The view from the top of Havenwood Tower had always taken my breath away. The city sprawling to the west, the Atlantic glimmering to the east. But that afternoon, standing on the private balcony with Ethan and Lily, it looked different. The world felt smaller, closer, higher. Lily laughed, holding our hands as we lifted her into the air, her laughter echoing above the hum of the city below. Her joy was infectious. For the first time in decades, I laughed freely, the kind of laughter that comes from the part of your soul that remembers what love used to feel like. Ethan set her down gently. She darted back inside, running toward the miniature model of our newest housing project, the new Havenwood community, designed for working families. Tiny model trees dotted the little streets. Toy cars lined the driveways. Lily began rearranging them with great seriousness. The board approved the Affordable Housing Initiative this morning, Ethan said quietly, coming to stand beside me. Construction starts next month. I smiled, watching the sunlight glint off the glass towers below. Your grandfather would have loved that project. He used to say that a home should outlast its mortgage and outshine its cost. Ethan nodded. I wish I could have known him. You do know him, I said softly. Every time you choose integrity over profit, every time you build something that gives a family hope, you're carrying him forward. He looked down, thoughtful, then smiled. You sound like him when you say things like that. Good, I said. Someone should. The afternoon faded into gold. We stood there for a long while, saying nothing, just breathing the same air. The wind smelled of salt and cut grass from the estate below. I've been thinking, Ethan said after a moment. The penthouse is too big for just me and Lily, and that old estate of yours has more empty rooms than any one person needs. I turned to him, half smiling. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? He shrugged lightly. Lily misses breakfast with you. And the commute from Palm Beach is brutal. I laughed quietly. So you're proposing a merger? Exactly, he said. A family merger. The words caught me off guard. Not because of their humor, but because of what they meant. For decades, I'd lived surrounded by walls, walls of marble, walls of memory, walls of guilt. And here, with one gentle question, he'd offered me a door. Havenwood was built for a family, I said softly. It's been waiting a long time to be one again. That evening, we returned to the estate. The sun hung low over the water, painting everything in amber light. Lily ran ahead through the foyer, her shoes tapping against the marble like tiny bells. Grandma Ellie, come see the pond, she called, tugging my hand. We walked through the garden, the koi pond gleaming under the fading light. The air was warm, alive with the sound of crickets and the soft rustle of leaves. Daddy says we can put fish in the pond, she said excitedly. Can we, Grandma? I smiled. Our pond, you mean? She nodded firmly. Our pond. I glanced at Ethan over her head. He was watching me with that quiet steadiness that once belonged to Samuel, that same unspoken promise of loyalty and love. I think your grandfather would insist on it, I said. Lily laughed and clapped her hands. The sound was pure joy. As twilight deepened, the three of us stood by the pond, 3 generations bound not by blood alone, but by choice, by forgiveness, by the courage to rebuild what others had broken. I thought of Samuel, of the long road that had brought me here, from betrayal and loneliness to this gentle peace. For 30 years I had been a ghost in my own home, haunting the halls of memory. Now, with Lily's hand in mine and Ethan's presence beside me, I was alive again. The cycle had broken, the legacy had healed, and Havenwood, at last, had become what Samuel always dreamed it could be. Not a monument to wealth, but a living, breathing home. I looked up at the stars just beginning to appear above the garden. We did it, Samuel, I whispered. Lily tugged my sleeve. What did you say, Grandma? I smiled and squeezed her hand. Just talking to an old friend, sweetheart. The 3 of us turned back toward the house, the warm lights spilling across the veranda like a promise kept. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't a widow guarding a mausoleum. I wasn't the mother of a lost son. I wasn't a ghost at all. I was home,